So at that point, the only explanation that I had was one that Tillie offered, which at that point was kind of like okay, now that you've seen something, here is a possible explanation that your phone disappeared into the quantum and it came back roughly where you left it, but not quite where you left it.
Back to the Jupiter podcast. I'm your host, Tom Franklin, and today we have on the wonderful Artemaeus Treadwell, and we're going to get into some things that may be different than what I usually do, but I like doing them. You'll see, I had on Fire Lotus the Witch, and I had on, I had on person about psychedelics, and this time we're going to go into some other things. And why not? Why not? Why does it always have to be Bigfoot or Dogman or something like that? Let's go into other things. Let's expand our consciousness. Let's spiral out into the universe and be the most powerful being that we most possibly can by the knowledge, imparted wisdom of people who've had other experiences other than what you've had. So if you enjoy that, please do me a favor and like and subscribe to the channel. Maybe you'd become a member and you could maybe get some episodes early. That'd be nice. Or you can go over to Spotify and leave me a rating. You can go ahead and buy a t-shirt or a hat somewhere in the bottom. T-shirt, hat, posters, all this kind of things down in the description in the bottom. I also have social media links and everything down there. So if you want to connect or reach out to me, or if you want to talk to me on the show, you can reach out to me by using the email, which is thejupiterpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll have you on. So with all that being said, let's welcome to the show Artemaeus Treadwell.
How you doing, Tom? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I reached out to you quite a while ago. It was maybe a month and a half ago.
Yeah. The schedule tends to be a little bit tight to work in with, a day job and whatnot.
Oh, I understand, man. I was up on the roof today, putting up solar panels, and about 12:30 thunderstorms kicked in, and we had to get off of there for an hour and a half and just kind of wait in the garage and then get up there. So
yep.
But that's life, man. It's just that's the part of it. Like every day is something different. You try to learn something. You try to cut some bad stuff away and just try to become a better version of yourself.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just going with the flow too. I'm not trying to force anything. Being smart about what you're doing and analyzing what might be the best move to make at that particular moment makes sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So please do me a favor and tell me, a little bit about yourself and where we can find you.
Yeah, definitely. So right now, my wife and I, Tillie, run a channel over on YouTube. It's called The Weird Walk Home. And I've had to take a little bit of a pause. Speaking of life in general, I have been doing a video diary called the Intermediary Diaries, where I vlog basically about all of my paranormal experiences since getting involved with Tillie. So prior to Tillie, my life was, I would say, fairly average. Didn't have very many paranormal experiences at all. But Tillie, if anybody knows, is an intermediary of sorts. You might be able to call her. She has a great many paranormal experiences on the regular. Her experience is vastly different from me, just the average guy out there. And just coming together, I have really changed my worldview, my view on human psychology, and have learned a great deal from non-human psychology. So the experiences that I have seem to be fairly different from what the average person might experience with, you were mentioning, like Dogman or UFO experiences or anything of that nature, where people tend to be a little bit cautious, fearful. Maybe they're what they would label as negative experiences with demons or, that sort. But I have not had such a thing, and I think it's been because of my understanding now, being in such close proximity to Tillie, who has such a different psychology than what I'm used to in dealing with the average person, high ego content. She is, yeah, she is what you might call part of the neurodivergent community. Some people will say that that includes the autism spectrum. I would believe that. Wouldn't say that necessarily an autistic person is an alien. I mightn't go that far, a non-human person. But the psychology is pretty similar from what I'm finding out. So through all these experiences that I've had with my prior knowledge before coming to all this was very, very much based in evolutionary biology, the average human psychology, and animal behavior. Having kind of a direct comparison between the two has helped me, I think, to evolve as the average human being. So I want to
Fantastic.
impart any of that experience on and what I've kind of worked through and developed thus far as a result. So
Okay, tell me a little bit. So Tillie's your wife.
she is, yep.
Oh, that's
So we've
fantastic.
been, thank you, yep. We've been together. Let's see, it'll be 10 years here coming up in November,
Awesome,
and
man.
yeah, I've been married about half that. And so I met Tillie just about 10 years ago. We were doing the online dating thing, and like I said, I was pretty average up to that point. We did it off pretty well. Yeah, I can look back on it now and say that, but I had a massive ego and was very much head up my butt kind of thing. Had a very
Oh,
humbling experience in these paranormal occurrences that have happened, and then also just basically being schooled by my wife in a good way, I will say.
good, good. Well, tell me a little bit
Uh,
about her. Tell me a little bit about her.
yeah,
What was she like when you met her? What struck you as being different when you met her?
perfect way to start this. So
Oh,
we'd hit it off with direct messages. So I thought, okay, this be we can take it to the next step. We can go on an actual date. And so I went to go pick her up, meet her in person. And when she came bouncing out of her apartment, she was just like happy, bubbly, person, just that what you would say quintessential ray of sunshine. I now looking back on it, I realized that the response that I had to that was just a reflection of what my inner world, what was going on in there. But I remember seeing her coming out all happy and dandy, and I just went, "Ugh, nobody can be that happy," you know.
oh,
And it was, I say this now, trying to be as humble as possible and just admit every single fault and where I went wrong, because I feel like that's the first step to learning from your mistakes and growing and moving forward. So that was the first impression, meeting her in person anyway. And so we still went on the date. I still entertained it. I thought, okay, maybe I'm missing something because we had such good rapport with the messages. So you know the date's dragging a bit. Eventually, we ended up at a mall, and we were having such a good time with actual conversation because I decided to stop being an essentially. And we were, walking around talking, having a good time in that way. And the mall had actually shut down and locked up, and we didn't even know. The guards, apparently security, didn't even know that we were still in there. I don't know how, because it's not like we were hiding somewhere. And so we went to go leave, and the security comes out. Oh, no, sorry, I gotta let you out, didn't even know you're in here. So I go to take her home. We get in the car, and I've told this story many times, and I keep trying to find a better way to tell it, but it's difficult, because when we got to the car, she decided to let a little bit more of who she was, really underneath everything. Because I imagine being an intermediary, sharing stories with people, saying, yeah, I hear people talking that you can't see, and I can give information to you that there's no way anybody else could have known that. So that can be a very vulnerable thing for someone to
right.
just reveal to anybody. There are lots of different
Avenues of approach.
reactions.
Yeah, there's
Yes,
you,
reactions that people can have to that, and so yeah, and getting people to know you some more. So she decided to basically tell me who I was at what I would consider to be the soul essence, that level of ourselves that goes well beyond the masks and the ego and the facade, the character, the avatar that we put up here on this planet and walk about, being what we would say is us, but really is not the deep soul us,
The
you
true
know,
I. The true
the
I.
true, yeah. And so she decided to tell me who I was at that level, which I had never even written something like this down about myself, much less told anybody else. But it resonated so deeply that it was in that moment, that type of intimacy that I think so many people are looking for, where they feel like they are actually being seen for
Wow.
who they are, you know?
Wow.
And I, at that moment, having grown up the way that I did, which in a household of, my father was a Marine, which, by the way, anything that I say about my parents, I'll give the disclaimer. I love them to pieces. I know they did the best they could with what they had. We have a good relationship now. Things were a little bit rocky there for a while. But anyway, my dad, tours of duty Marine, emotional intelligence, not exactly his specialty. And my mother, very young, high schooler when she had me, so still a child herself. So anyway, all that to say that, I kind of learned not to really trust people, or at the very least, shows of emotion and things like that were very much squashed way down.
Right. So it's been
And
so it's
so
been extremely transformational for you to meet this person.
very, very much. So she gave this to me, and to say, she also said, in addition, I feel like we have this soul contract. We came here to fulfill a purpose together, and I
Wow.
love you for you, and the way that it was delivered, plus some validation that she gave me on top of it, which I will give in just a minute. All of that just like instantly stripped away, those walls that we usually build up within ourselves to keep people out and to keep ourselves protected. Which I understand why we do that, but it can often be limiting. And for me, it definitely was very stagnating. I didn't realize how suffocating that was until that particular moment. And so she reveals that to me, and then she also tells me, by the way, I will give you something that will, validate what I'm saying, so that you don't think I'm just cold reading or pulling this stuff, that anybody could necessarily pull just with a lucky guess. And she said there's a being, a spirit guide essentially, who is coming to me saying that their name is Chief, and they're presenting as a Native American chieftain. And she said this entity is connected with you as like a spirit guide, and somebody who has been with you and your family, watching over you, taking care of you, that sort of thing. And as she describes this chieftain, I went, oh my god, I know who exactly you're talking about. And we don't have any Native American in the family, but my father has always collected Native American memorabilia, paraphernalia. And on the wall outside of my bedroom door that I grew up with in our family home was a portrait, been there for years. And so she described, the type of headdress that he was wearing, the colors, the face, the pose, everything, and said, this entity is presenting themselves as this, so that I can tell you, with some validation, that the information that I'm giving you isn't just, thin air, lucky guess. There is something behind it, some
Wow.
proof essentially, which, this particular entity may not have been um, an actual Native American chieftain in any life, could have been presenting itself in such a way that, again, is personal to the
Right.
individual in question,
Right.
So when I
Right.
say that, when later, if we talk about mimics, that'll become important. So it was just that sort of 1-2 punch. And from that night, I think I was set up at that point to really accept a world that was much bigger than I knew at that point, which has made me a totally different person from that point. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's the start of it.
Right. I'm gonna before we continue on, I want to tell you that I'm really digging your tattoos. I
Oh
can't
yeah,
see
thank
them,
you.
but I love how they come up and then go across. It's
Yeah, yeah.
pretty cool,
So
dude.
it's all of the heritage from, most of my bloodline, which is all like Scandinavian, British Isles. So it's very, Celtic and Norwegian mythology essentially, and
Do you
it's
do you hold a lot
yeah.
of do you hold a lot of weight in your ancestry bloodlines and the connection you have to that?
So I think, oh gosh, I mean, a lot of what I feel are my past lives here, the connections that I have here are probably very much heavily weighted towards the more violent, warlike, Scandinavian, probably Viking. That is most likely a lot of my heritage. And up to that point, had the ego that I had identified with, which has now since been mostly stripped away,
Mhm.
was very heavily based in that. And I still, my tattoos, I don't wish to get rid of them. They're just part of the story of this,
Of
life
who? Of yeah,
existing.
right. Of
So
this iteration of yourself and
right, it
in its
is.
present form. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
I was thinking, like, when you were telling me about meeting Tillie, your wonderful wife there, like when you're with somebody for a very long time. I was with my wife. We're now separated and divorced, but
Mhm,
like we were together for 22 years, and
mhm.
it's really the odd thing about it is that when you meet somebody and you have that connection with somebody, the strange thing that happens is that you start realizing all of your faults. You know what I mean? You can see theirs, but then they start pointing out yours, and you go, "Oh man, I got a lot of work to do. I got a lot of shadow work to do."
Mhm.
I mean, what was that? What was that like for you? Did she was she able to like see and tell you something? Because you keep talking about the ego.
Yeah.
Was she able to like slowly like help you strip that away and become what you are now?
Yeah. So what's interesting is that she did that, but not in a very direct way. So when
Mm,
she first came to me, she still was having trouble understanding the human ego because the way that she had lived her life up to that point, very much a part of non human psychology, which is very low in ego content. You could say pretty naive, very innocent, and very much based in mutual cooperation and respect. It doesn't have a very high survival instinct. We'll just put it that way, like a lot of
okay,
humans do, which, to be very
okay,
selfish, that's natural. Not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying these are just, the objective quality description of the qualities. And so she didn't quite understand that bit. But by my, loving her in return, learning how to do that, and then her just loving the core of me helped me to, it essentially gave me the fuel to face, the courage to face all of that, super wounded warrior ego that I had and begin to heal that essentially. And she has since come to understand more about that, about human ego and, the average human psychology. But it was definitely more just her being that, like, the
like
example.
angelic, like an angelic
Yes. Yes.
kind of
Yes.
innocent being.
Yeah.
Wow,
The
man, you
example
got
by which.
lucky. You got very lucky
No,
to meet somebody like that,
that
dude.
lucky doesn't even begin to describe it, man. Yeah, that's which is why I think it absolutely has to be a soul contract because there's no way somebody that good, if they knew, would have gotten involved with somebody with as much baggage as I had. So there's been a lot to work through, definitely.
Well, could you do me a favor and maybe go through some of these, like you were talking about, paranormal experiences? Have you experienced some of this with her?
Yeah, yeah. So when after that first night, there was a little bit of a cooling off period, I think, because it was such a profound, impactful thing that needed to simmer for a little bit. It needed to grow and get in some roots before the paranormal stuff, the real, paranormal activity started ramping up so that I could trust her and her ability to facilitate, communicate with, interpret these experiences while, I was busy tamping down that fight or flight response that people typically have to these sorts of things because it's the unknown, right? That's very scary for
It's
the
very
average
scary,
person.
yes.
Sure. So there was a simmering down period. We were living up north at that point, and then we moved down to Florida in 2018. Which, for anybody that knows the paranormal in general, Florida's a hotbed for that stuff. There's a lot of weird crap that happens here. And I think it must just be the vibration of the land itself that just is a portal, as a facilitator for this kind of thing,
It's got a lot of springs. It's got a lot of,
amplifier. Yeah.
it's also maybe the original Fertile Crescent,
Mm.
part of the original, because I'm here on the Yucatan Peninsula. So if
Okay.
you're in Florida, so it's the
Yeah.
sea, and then you
Yep.
have Alabama. So I don't know where the prefix for that word comes from.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, just stuff I pick up too listening to podcasts. So yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
Sure.
Florida's it's got many reasons, a lot of wild people down there.
Yeah, there's a reason. I am convinced now that Florida Man is definitely part of the paranormal lore at this point because
It's just your
he's
neighbor
just
down
as
the street.
crazy as some of the other shit. But yeah,
Yes, sir.
so but anyway, so nothing really happened paranormally until we moved to Florida, January 2018, and then it started with the first experience that I had seems rather benign, but also was one of those moments that I had no explanation for. I couldn't just reach back in my bag of, scientific whatever and go, oh, it was probably this. No, there was nothing. And so I felt like at that point I was forced to confront the possibility of other, that category that, we cannot yet quite explain. So and it's so basic too. I lost my cell phone briefly, like people usually do. You misplaced it, and I had been in the house, hadn't gone anywhere. In fact, I didn't think I'd left the bedroom when I lost it. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna, pull off the covers on the bed and pillows, whatever. It's got to be under here somewhere. No luck, no luck. And now I'm searching other areas of the house. Okay, I've lost my mind. Maybe it's somewhere else. I had it in my hand and set it down somewhere absentmindedly. I'm looking everywhere. Nope, can't find it still. Now I'm looking inside the fridge and, under the car, like, where the hell is this thing? Like, I'm getting desperate.
It's behind the rice
So
pudding. It's behind the rice
yeah,
pudding for
can't
sure.
find it. So then I'm like, all right, let's go back to where I last saw it. It's maybe I missed it somehow. And I had pulled all the covers off of the bed and I, felt all over. It wasn't there. But when I went back to the bed and I ran my hand over the mattress, which at that point only had the fitted sheet on it, my hand hit what felt like my phone. And I went, okay, what it's under, it is under. It's under the fitted fucking sheet.
Right.
Stuff under the fitted mattress. Mattress protector is my phone, which and Tillie is not the kind of person to pull pranks. Like she wants it any paranormal experience to there'd be no doubt whatsoever that she did not cause that. It was something that, paranormal experience that happened. And so I pull off the fitted sheet, there's my phone, and I'm sitting there thinking, I didn't make the bed. And I felt all over the bed. It wasn't there before. I know it wasn't. I couldn't miss it. So at that point, the only explanation that I had was one that Tilly offered, which at that point was kind of like okay, now that you've seen something, here is a possible explanation that your phone disappeared into the quantum and it came back roughly where you left it, but not quite where you left it. And it's somewhat a tangential, related adjacent idea to the Mandela effect, where, multiple layers of reality all happening at the same time, and that we are experiencing different realities sometimes when we have a memory of something being one way, and in the current reality, it is another way. So at that moment, I was introduced to the Mandela effect, and
Okay.
not just somebody's memory might just be misremembering, which happens often. And I had attributed all Mandela to that. Just people got crappy memories. It happens. And in this case, though, because the phone reappeared where I had already checked thoroughly, and in a manner in a place that it could not have gotten there from, you know, anything that I did,
Right.
that was the introduction. And I've had other situations where things have appeared, disappeared, and reappeared on me, multiple objects over the years at this point. It's a rather common occurrence, rather annoying occurrence that I find at this point. But nonetheless, it never happened to me before, and now multiple
Okay.
times.
Right. Right.
So one of which I'll mention briefly, this hair tie. This was another one of those things that, as Tilly and I were standing in front of a mirror, bathroom mirror together, and it's a plain piece of glass. There's no shelves anywhere around. It's a very small room, and we're both staring straight at the mirror, and right at about, I don't know, lower chest slash belly height, a black hair tie, as I'm staring at the mirror, just drops to the countertop. And it did not come from behind me. It wasn't, Tilly putting up her hair and somehow it just, fell out of her hair and down over onto the countertop. It literally appeared from
And fell.
thin air and fell maybe 6 inches, maybe right onto the countertop. So, and it was high
Wow.
contrast too, so I couldn't miss it. It wasn't a corner of my eye trick or anything like that. So I tried every which way that I could to explain how that happened. And
Okay.
before I might have been like, oh, so what? It's something small. But when you really think about it, small or not, it's still something that we do not have an explanation for. Where it appears as though something literally popped into existence from the ether, from nowhere.
Oh
So.
yeah, the ether is the way they used to describe everything around us. You know what I mean? Now they
Mhm.
use like black matter and the
Right.
troposphere and all that stuff. It's just a scientific term. But in the old days, before the Rockefeller school system, that was very common. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I think we've lost a lot of our because being a Scandinavian too, you got your runes, there's a
Yeah.
lot of hoo hee hoo that I enjoy about that. I
Yeah.
try to
Right. Yeah.
explain because I'm here on like I was saying, the Yucatan Peninsula. My girlfriend is Mayan,
Mm.
and yeah, and she tells me all her stories about ghosts and witches and weird stuff around here. And I was like, yeah, but you understand Europe because I lived there for 20 years, and I try to
Mhm.
imagine it if I went back say 2,000 3,000 years before it was populated the way it is. It is a spooky, cloudy, foggy, misty, boggy place. It's so
Mhm.
strange.
Yeah.
And people miss out on it. We get on a train in Frankfurt and we get off in Paris to go to Disneyland. It was just wonderful. I'm like, I think you're missing a lot of what we lost. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
okay, so you're basically kind of headed towards like some type of, I don't know how you would say it. Not what I might be jumping the gun and getting, I can't think of the word right now, but you're trying to underline your idea of what the paranormal is. Maybe you can kind of like lay that out for me and tell me what you think it is.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So, ooh, yeah, that's a big question. So, yeah,
Yeah,
these little
yeah.
things,
Jumping the gun.
it was, no, that's okay. No, we can work with it. We can roll with it. So I mean, these little stories, basically to say, little bit at a time, easing open that crack, for I think the average person like me to be able to experience these things that we do not have an explanation for, that we cannot see with our average human eyes or perceive average human brain, without freaking out. Basically, the paranormal for me encompasses at this point everything that the average human doesn't usually experience or see, because the way that the theory that I have is that humans have a particular neurochemistry, neurowiring that only allows us a narrow spectrum of experience. And it's there for a reason, for
It's
us to.
right. It's an evolutionary survival thing, if I
That's
understand
that's
correctly.
definitely one aspect of it. Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
That's things like the default mode network.
Oh
And
wow. Oh yeah. I forgot that you studied this. So you're gonna go ahead, school me.
I was gonna say I'll try to make it as easy as I can.
Oh, dude, you're
So the
using words
default
like would you say?
tangential, yeah,
I was
sorry.
just like, I think I know what that means.
Adjacent, which is, yeah, sometimes I grab for
Well, no
different
worries.
words that I
No
think
worries.
that'll work
If
for
I don't
people.
understand, I have
Um,
no ego in asking you, what does that mean? I promise you.
Please do. Yeah, I was gonna
Yes,
say I'm not afraid to explain. In fact, if I say something you don't understand, please ask me, because I know
absolutely.
how we don't have much time to talk, so I try to go
Oh,
through as much as I possibly can. So the part of the chemistry, the brains that we have are definitely geared towards surviving here. That is one of the main axioms, one of the main tenets, one of the main features of life on this planet, is that you must survive, right? Which is not something that other dimensions, other non-human peoples, that's not part of their psychology, because it's not an aspect of their experience. It doesn't govern their daily lives. They have different experiences because the rules are set differently than we have here. So, I mean, I always ask people, I mean, imagine a world where you weren't worried about not having enough food,
right.
because, like in other dimensions, they feed off of ether, and there is no such thing as no food. So, if we were not worried about starving to death, having an uncomfortable experience in that way, how would that free up, our psychology and our treatment of one another when we're not fighting over resources, essentially? Now,
Yeah.
I'm not saying, again, that the experience that we have here is somehow bad. It's just an experience. We come here, I believe, to have this experience. As terrible as it may be sometimes to experience, it is nonetheless an experience. So in the infinite. And so, yes, the default mode network, which is as you grow older, your brain will take your experiences and go, okay, this was good because I got, food, I got care, I got, shelter, I got something from it, something good, and I'm going to do this again. This experience was, took away from me. I got injured, I got hurt, I got, something, mentally, emotionally, physically, whatever it was, bad experience. I'm not going to do this again. And, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, this judgment. And it happens throughout your life to the point where your brain starts to kind of close you in a box. Even though there's an infinite number of experiences you can have here, if you are not paying attention, if you're not being mindful, your own brain will start to control your behavior based on this good, bad judgment. And we call that the default mode network. It's the way that your brain starts to, kind of evolve itself basically in this life. So what's interesting is that psychedelics turn that off.
I was going to go there. Yeah. I
Right.
think what actually happens is that like we're only perceiving like I think something like 10% of what actually is happening because of that default mode. And what happens is that it like opens that up, which is where the paranoia comes in, because you can experience much more, say, pleasure 100 times more. We'll just go with a number, but you can also experience 1,000 times more displeasure because you're now open to that. So if that happens, guys, especially when it comes to the cannabis realm, which I'm not an expert in, but I do like, just look at the clock and wait 20 minutes and then tell me how you feel.
Right. Yeah. This too shall pass, basically. Yeah.
Say it again.
This too shall pass, basically.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that applies to our lives in general. Eventually,
yeah, it kind of messes up the filter. It takes the filter away in the prefrontal cortex and says, "Hey, did you notice that shadow in the corner over there?"
Right. Yep. Yep. It'll activate different parts of your brain so that you can actually perceive different vibrations, different wavelengths, which is that. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion entirely. So basically, what I deem the paranormal is all of that other stuff that the average human being is not used to experiencing because of those typical brain structures and functions. So for me, that's everything from remote viewing, telepathy, clairvoyance, to being able to communicate with or see non-human entities. Gosh, astral projection. I mean, there's a lot of things, and then also all of those entities that exist in those other dimensional realms, cryptids, interdimensional beings of all sorts. So yeah, it encompasses all of that for me.
Yeah, you kind of lean in the same area that I kind of come from, honestly. You'll hear, you have your Christians. I'm not going to, pound on them or whatever. I have friends who are that, but they'll say, "Oh no, it's all demons," or they're, Bigfoot are giants from, the fallen angels and whatever they call that. I can't think of the word right now. And then you'll have people that'll go, it's this or it's that. But I kind of what I'm basically trying to understand is like, you're saying like, the dimensions are all around us at all times, and we're just experiencing this part of it, the four-dimensional space. And it's like sometimes they kind of bump into each other and kind of spill over. And I think if you kind of condition yourself to be open to that experience, I mean, if I'm wrong, please, then maybe you will see it differently. Is that what you're trying to kind of say? Like in a
roundabout way. And I have more that I can give you on that specifically, scientifically. What I think. Yeah. So there's a couple aspects to why we don't, as the average human, experience more of this. One of those, again, is the neurodivergence, or the way that the brains are wired. So there was a series put out called the Telepathy Tapes by an individual who themselves neurodivergent. I think they identify as somewhere on the autistic spectrum. Those brains are wired differently. And briefly, I'll mention within those telepathy tapes, those individuals talk about being able to visit essentially a virtual classroom in their minds, see other neurodivergent beings or non-human entities, and communicate with them. And that makes sense to me because, and by the way, the name, it just popped into my mind. Kai Dickens was the name of the person who put out the telepathy tapes. If anybody listening is interested in that sort of material, the reason that that can happen, so our brains are consistently in a particular wavelength, so a radio frequency, you could
Okay.
consider it.
Hmm.
So there's alpha, beta, theta, and delta are the four major brain frequencies. So alpha is the, I guess you could say, relaxed meditative state. There's beta, which is high beta, or low beta, which is high beta would be, I forget which one, maybe don't quote me, but it's fight or flight usually, or intense workout states. Doesn't have to be, fight or flight, but it could be, functional day to day. Theta is the twilight where you're not quite asleep, not quite awake, and delta is deep sleep. And so for me, I think the reason that I can communicate and experience things in the dream realm is because it typically happens in theta when I'm in a completely different brainwave state. And for people who are higher ego content, and when I say higher ego, I don't mean full of themselves. I know that's typically what it has come to mean in the average vernacular, average lingo speak when people
Hmm.
talk about it.
Hmm. Hmm.
But when I say ego, I just mean somebody who is very much enveloped in their own interests and story and in their own heads, basically. So maybe less objective, less able to look at a situation and just see the facts. They'll be giving judgments about those things, or
Right.
they will be experiencing how does it impact me. Usually it's a very self-focused state. So people with high ego content who have a particular, neurochemistry or brain makeup, parts of their brain maybe not as functional as others. That's not saying that they're dumb. It's just different parts of the brain working and active. Those people will struggle to have paranormal experiences, and or if they do, they may judge them as very negative.
Wow.
May have the more negative paranormal experiences because I have also developed theories on this based on my own interactions with non-human entities at this point, having dialed my ego down, way down, been humbled by an experience with ayahuasca.
Oh.
Yeah, had a
Oh, Mother
weekend of that.
Ayahuasca. All right.
Yeah, got knocked all the way down with that one, which, necessary. I think at that point, I realize now I'm good with all of that, lots of insight. But, I have, through working to dial down that ego and then working to meditate and or focus more on the brainwave states that I'm in, that's where I can have my paranormal experiences or tap into some things
Wow.
more conscientiously, basically, purposefully, with purpose. And there are some people that just naturally, they have the brain wired and communicating a certain way, and they just naturally exist in a certain brainwave state that it's like a radio frequency. They're just tuned in to the same frequency that non-human entities inhabit or communicate on. So you can manipulate it a little bit with the right things, but if you aren't, born a certain way, genetics will also play into that, which is why there are some people that say, "Oh, I've been seeing and hearing things since I was a child." And
Yeah.
they have, a particular brain that's different from the average person that can tap into those kinds of things more naturally. So,
Wow. What can you tell me about these non-human entities and your experiences with them?
sure. Yeah. So I have only had, oh, well, oh gosh, where do I start with that? Okay. So, um, I to that prior to that point, my experiences with non-human entities had been what I would say neutral, where I would notice things watching, where I would be communicated in my dream state by beings presenting themselves as things like Egyptian gods, for example. I had one of those somewhat
Oh.
recently. The dream, it was a message actually given to me, and I gave that message to the person for whom it was intended, and it was very relevant, resonated, timely, was needed. And then, aside from those which have been, like I said, neutral to borderline pleasant, the only, what I would say, negative, downright actually terrifying experience that I had with a non-human entity was resolved relatively quickly by Tillie on my behalf, essentially. I'll go ahead and get into the story because talking
Yes,
about it here
please.
in a roundabout is probably not helping. So, and this is more after this experience, I started to realize more about, how non-human psychology works and how we could actually use that to hack our own relationships for what I would consider to be healthier interaction. So anyway, this negative experience that I had, it happened in the dream state, and or twilight, you could say, theta brainwaves. I'm sitting up in my bed, looking dead ahead. Why, I'm not really sure. But to my left, in this dream state, is a small mirror on the wall, which in reality did not exist. In my waking reality, didn't exist. But I'm looking ahead, see out of the corner of my eye in the mirror, something moves inside it. And I know because I'm looking ahead of the mirror that there's nothing in front of that mirror. And so
Right.
that's now at the part of your brain, if anybody's listening, maybe the hair on the back of your neck standing up, because that's the lizard portion of your brain that's putting pieces together going, hey, dude, if there's nothing in front of that mirror and there's something moving in the mirror, we're not used to this. That's not right. So maybe you should check it out. And so, and no sooner did I turn over to look, did something very large, very dark, start coming head first through this mirror. And I
Wow.
didn't even have time to react. This entity elicited from me a response that was absolute, like pure wavelength of terror, sheer terror. And I've never had that in my life. I've never been afraid for my life. I've had a pretty good life. I've never been in a situation where I was genuinely concerned about my well being. And it was just like when you go to the doctor and they hit you on the knee and you get that knee jerk response, you have no control over it. This being immediately caused me that deep and visceral feeling of, oh shit. And I started screaming in this dream. Also something that I don't do ever. In fact, I don't think I've ever screamed like that. And it was like the floodgates just turned open and I was just a nothing but a vessel, a channel for the pure wavelength of horror. And I, up to that point, had some experience with lucid dreaming, so I knew how to end a dream that I didn't want to be a part of anymore. So I did, and as I come to, I'm shaking, I'm sweating, I'm heart's beating a mile a minute. So that response is still happening, and Tillie's sound asleep next to me. So I woke her up. I said, "Hey, I think you really need to know. I feel like there's something around here that clearly this thing does not mean well, and I need some help because I don't know how to navigate around this. I don't know why it happened." Which is the experience that I imagine a lot of people who come into contact with cryptids or other beings that maybe have the ability to, hack this lizard brain portion that we
Right,
have,
right. The fear, yes.
the fear response. And so I lucky enough to turn to Tillie and say, "Hey, like, help." And she said, I don't feel like this person is around anymore. Still, I think the message was given, but let me tap into this and see if I can communicate and find out what's going on. And so after I leave to go to work, she invites this entity in, and come to find out that she had been discussing with a colleague of hers the business essentially of this particular entity, and he did not appreciate that at all. And so Tillie, being the ever so respectful person that she is, said, I'm really sorry. I didn't know that this wasn't okay. I probably should have asked first. Like, I didn't know. Please tell me what I can do to make this better." And in non-human psychology, they have the interest and the ability to make very clear agreements, one, two, three, rules about engaging with one another. It's very cooperative and respectful, and those rules will always be adhered to without exception. So, I broke it because I was hungry or I didn't get enough sleep, or no, those are not excuses. It's always adhered to, and if there ever needs to be a change, there's a mutual coming to the table. You work it out. You find new rules. It's what's good for you is good for me. Okay, and we go about our ways. So she made an agreement, 1, 2, 3, with this individual, and those have always been adhered to. And I occasionally must be reminded of them because, as an imperfect human, I cannot remember all of those sorts of things, which is why I don't make deals with non-human entities, because I can't keep them simply based on my lack of ability to remember. And so, hey, admitting my limits.
It's fine.
So yeah, so she made that deal, and this has been several years now. I've not had anything even remotely approaching that kind of experience. And from what I understand, non-human entities only operate on contracts. And whether or not you understand the contract, you may be, putting out particular parameters that draw in these entities as a contractual agreement, which is why it behooves anybody to do their shadow work, as you said, understand who you are underneath, why you're doing the things you're doing, so that you can keep the paranormal activity to what you might consider a more pleasant frequency.
Wow.
And that makes a whole load of difference in the experiences that you're going to have. So
Right. So you're saying you have to kind of fix yourself
yes.
before, like, if these things are happening to you, you have to look inside and see why they're happening to you.
Yes, exactly. And this
Right.
is not victim blaming. For anybody out there hearing this,
No,
going,
no, it's a
I was attacked by a demon or something, and
what you're saying
and
to
for me,
me. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
What happened to me is recently. I had 2 nights ago. I had my first what do they call that? Uh, Sleep paralysis in a long, long time. That and
Mhm,
for years. So I got to look into that. I don't know what it was. I was trying to. It was something said about myself. I believe it was kind of like, this is a part. Like, I knew it was there.
mhm,
There's something bad and dark that's there, and I was trying to protect somebody, which I think was me.
mhm, mhm,
And then when I went down to tell this person, watch out for this, whatever this was, it looked kind of, like a native, and like a native person from the western side of the world, and it had a face
mhm,
paint on it that was kind of lines. I remember the face, and it came out from a
mhm,
bookshelf and just jumped out at me, and I woke up screaming, but I couldn't wake up. I was in theta, I guess you would call it,
mhm.
but I
Yep.
could hear myself screaming.
Mhm,
So I
mhm.
kept screaming until I woke myself up.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was really intense. It's been quite a while since that's happened to me.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, I mean, there could be a lot of things going on there. One of which is, I mean, sleep paralysis could be something based in a medical, issue. So it doesn't always have to be paranormal. That's one thing we got to keep in mind, is that if for anything that we can't explain, not necessarily something to jump straight
Stress
to the
for sure.
paranormal, but
Stress for
sleep
sure.
paralysis, that could definitely be a medical condition. But
Hmm.
to also think, we tend to jump straight to protecting ourselves. Again, that's part of the human training, because we got to try to keep these meat suits alive while we're here. That's the whole point, right?
Okay.
But avoiding a problem is a massive trigger. So essentially, burying your head in the sand and saying, nope, that doesn't, I can't do anything about it, that doesn't exist. Take
The
personal
strange one is
responsibility.
that I know with me, it's like I know there is one, but I don't know
Yep.
what it is. I don't know what it
Right.
is.
Yeah.
But like it's
So
slowly kind of opening itself, like layer by layer, and I kind of go, okay, this is a little bit of this, but it's like I can't point the finger out. I need to point those 3 fingers that are in return back to myself and see what that is. And
yeah.
I think I'm trying to figure it out. And I think as it's opening up, more things are coming out. I don't know. Well, I'm working on it, dude.
Sure.
I'm working on it.
Yeah. No, you're doing. That's great that you're doing the work like that. The other thing is fighting the thing. So, I mean, think about everything as a frequency, as a vibration, right? So, they say fire doesn't beat fire. Okay. So, when we come at a problem or something in our dreams and we are fighting something, and I've heard this over and over again from people who have analyzed their dreams and then decided to do and they say, "Oh, I'm always fighting this dragon, or I'm fighting this demon, or I'm, fight, 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 fight." So they get fight, 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 fight. But when they finally sit back and just go, "Okay, I'm not going to fight you. This isn't about dying. There's fate's worse than death, certainly. So
Wow.
what is it?
Go ahead, buddy. Go ahead. Yeah, dude.
So, what is it that I can do here that's different?" And in these dreams, people say, all of a sudden, that thing that was trying to kill me just kind of smiles and then goes away. And
Yeah.
I never had that dream anymore. So it's like you said, turn that in on yourself. Okay, I'm fighting something. I don't need to fight. I need to
Yeah.
look at it, embrace it. The only way out is through.
Yeah,
That's
it's kind of like that old adage: when you stare into the abyss stares back at you.
stares back,
It's
right?
it's
Mhm.
kind of like that. It wasn't like I was fighting; it just surprised me, even though I knew it was
Sure.
there.
Yeah.
You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? And that's why
Yeah.
it just freaked me out, which woke me up. But it
Mhm.
didn't really scare me as much. It was just like kind of like boo, and I was just like,
Yeah.
oh God. So that's what it
Right.
was. Yeah, and I
Sure.
went back to sleep 10 minutes later. Girlfriend woke up.
That's
She goes,
good.
"What's wrong with you?" And I go, "I had a bad dream." And she
Right.
goes, "You
Yeah.
okay?" I'm like, "Yep." All right, back to sleep. So it
Yeah.
wasn't that bad. I've had ones that'll
Good.
keep me up for half the night, but not that one. Not
Yeah.
that one. Even though it was very scary, it's just
Mhm.
it's gotten better, and
Yeah.
it's
Good.
yeah, they can be scary. They can be, but I think they know that. They know that. They know
Mhm.
how to push those buttons because
They do.
that's part of what we are. People
Mhm.
always want to like hide themselves away from that. You know what I mean? I'm
Mhm.
not that. I'm a good person. But like, yeah, of course you're a good person, but you also have bad thoughts too. People don't want to hear
Right.
that. People don't want to
Right.
hear that or face that
Well,
about themselves.
and good and bad are totally subjective depending on the perspective.
Also
For
true.
anybody, the shepherd who, looks at the wolf and says the wolf is a bad guy also has a family to feed. So it just depends on which end of the stick you're on. And that's why I do not consider good or evil. There are no judgments like that. There are only different aspects to an experience.
Right. Right. Man, different aspects to an experience. Yeah, if you're supposed to be able to look at things from six different angles, which would also be a box, because that would be in the three-dimensional space you're working in, which is
Mm.
also kind of incorrect because if you're working in the three-dimensional space, that means you're still here.
Yeah.
So, I'm with you, bro. I'm riding your wave, man.
Yeah.
Because I get a lot of people that say it differently, and that's what I enjoy. It's like the teasing apart of a concept and an idea. I had a Fire Lotus the Witch on, and we got in the things that this person was talking about was really the way they were talking about it really reminded me of a lot of Eastern mysticism and the
Mhm.
pineal gland and the connection to the eye and all those things. And I was just like, oh yeah. And they were like, wow. And you know what I mean? I enjoy that too, because a lot of this kind of podcast realm is like, people expect the big got you headlines and stuff.
Yeah.
But like, why can't we just have conversations that, if it interests you, that's great. If it don't, well, maybe we can change your mind a little bit and maybe it'll help you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's what I want to do. It's like I was saying, you want to spiral out because I do enjoy like Tool and I really enjoy. Yes, great band.
Yeah.
Well, let me
Yes.
wake you up to a band. You ever listen to the band called Yob?
No, I haven't heard that one yet.
Well, go check out Yob and listen
Alright.
to
I will
the
definitely
Path
do
to
that.
Ascension, the Path to Ascend from 2014. Incredible
Okay,
doom
cool.
metal, psychedelic doom metal album. It's all
Yes.
about internalizing, and it goes, dude. And that's where I
Yeah.
am.
Is that
Yeah,
how is
man.
that spelled? YAUB
No,
or
it's like boy backwards, YOB.
Oh, okay. Alright.
Yeah,
Cool.
incredible. It like changed my guitar playing. It changed my concepts of how music is written, and it's
Yeah.
just like, and the
Awesome.
songs are all like 10 to 20 minutes long, and it's just
Jam
you're
sessions.
out there,
Cool.
dude. You're out there. A
Very
little bit of
cool.
green, get in my bed. So it just go inside and
Yeah.
ride the wave. It's what I mean. I enjoy that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and what's cool about, for anybody who's interested, marijuana, obviously, that is one way to achieve a particular brain wavelength. That's what's happening anytime you do these, as they call them, mind altering drugs. That's what they're doing is they are changing the pathways in your brain so that you are processing things differently. You are able to do the same things with meditation. It
I
takes more practice. It's
I
not
kind of
I
yeah.
could just,
I kind of
yeah.
think honestly, my opinion on this. I mean, I love to hear it. I think like marijuana is its own entity. It's a
Yes.
connection. It's
Yes.
a connection to the plant world. You're literally talking to whatever that is, to the
Mhm.
other, to, I would say it's to plant vegetation itself. Ayahuasca is kind of the same thing. It's two plants mixed together, the root of this and that. If not, it goes into your stomach
Mhm.
and it breaks down. How did you
Right.
guys figure it out? The plants told us to.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like,
Exactly.
what?
Yeah. Right.
I,
Yeah.
I love that stuff. I've read a lot of books. I'm a big Terrence McKenna fan, and Alan Watts. I get into all
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah,
Excellent.
dude, I
Yep.
love that stuff.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
people don't like that. People don't like to internalize a lot of things. They just kind of want to go on to the next wave. Which, if you do that, then they control you. You're being controlled. My opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, here's the interesting thing, and something that I've kind of, or rather, I should say, I found it interesting in what I have arrived at, when
Okay.
thinking about different people out there, how the reception of this information is taken. As you were saying, people, quote unquote, are looking for the grabby headline, something that gets their attention, and I think that for the people who are living unconscious lives, who are
Mm,
not as mindful, are being once again controlled by that portion of their brain, the lizard brain, that is looking for the grabby headlines, because it's still about, is this going to kill me or is this going to help me? Kill me, help me, kill me, help me. So it's always looking out for the bam, the hit you headline, because that is what grabs their attention. The people who are living conscientious lives, the mindful ones, the ones who have already started to subvert that lizard brain, that primitive brain, the lower portion,
mm,
and begin to listen to the things that, like this, they're more subtle whispers, you know,
yeah.
these other podcasts where it's more about going within, gaining that esoteric knowledge, So I don't bother with, trying to, for any of our own content, hit the grabby headlines or, hit that panic button in the brain to get people to click, 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 because that's not the audience that's going to get anything from the information that I'm telling them. They don't,
Right.
that's not applicable to them. They're not on that level, and that's okay. That is the experience and the existence that they're living at that point. For the other people, that's who I speak
Well,
to.
I like both. I like both. The thing is
Sure.
like there's not. I think you come to a certain point. If you're like, for example, sports are kind of silly. If you really think about it, they're super silly. You know what I mean? But I still enjoy them. I still
Of
enjoy
course.
them. But the thing
Of
is, I'm
course.
aware of what it is. When you get
Mhm.
that emotional feeling of like, yeah, it's like, well, it's that primal thing where like we're together. You're wearing purple, I wear purple, so therefore we're on the same team. But I'm aware of that, so I
Yeah.
still enjoy it. But I'm
Mhm.
aware of it instead of letting it be who I am.
Of
It's just a
course.
part
Yeah.
of what I am. That's all it
Right.
is.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
and there's other aspects to sports. We can even crack that open a little bit further and say that there's certainly that tribalism aspect of it. That's basically ritualized warfare. That's what
yes.
sports are. That's what sports are, and I totally agree with you on that level. But there's also other aspects to different sports, just like baseball, for example. I love baseball. I don't watch football because I know that's a little bit more of a visceral sport. Nothing wrong with it. It's just not my thing. But baseball, because there is more strategy in certain ways. It's not as fast paced. It's more, I don't know, there's something a little bit more relaxing to it for me, but still, exciting in that way. But I don't watch it for the competition in that way. I watch it for all of the other aspects of it. And then for the people participating, if it's not for the competition, it could just be about moving your body in ways that actually help to facilitate brain development, health, all of those things. It doesn't have to be one, for one faceted reason. So,
Yeah, I would
I mean,
even being a musician. You look like a
right.
musician. I'm going to go out there and say you most likely are. Uh,
I've dabbled a little bit. I've
but
dabbled. Yeah.
the concept of playing an instrument is
Mhm.
very good for the mind. There's
Mhm.
so many processes going on at the same time that opens your mind up to the experience. It's like, okay, you learn a composition, whatever that is, however you learn it. I don't read notes. I just either tablature or it's in my head.
Mhm.
You're playing it and so you remember it's this way. As you're playing it, you hear it and you correct while playing it all at the same time and judging it and correcting it. It's a very, and then you get to learn like the left and right hemisphere at the same time, or especially play guitar like
Right.
myself or drums. It's even
Mhm.
splitting fours on drums, and it's very therapeutic and it's very it's interesting too when it comes to, like, people always talk about, you say the ether, I say the muse, or even the concept of just what's it, imagination. And people
Mhm.
just kind of, oh, it's just your imagination. Like, in everything you see, this internet we're using is built on the back of an idea that came from what, nowhere or
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah, nothing new under the sun is the concept that I've heard, is that
Well, that's
we're
a
there.
kind of a religious concept, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure, yeah. So that everything has already been, everything already exists. It's just a matter of manifesting it in a particular dimension from
Ooh,
somebody who is then channeling it. So, being an artist, for example, some of
yes.
the
I,
greatest
I
artists, if
paint.
you've
I paint.
ever. Yeah, okay, there you go
Yeah, dude.
too. Yep.
Yeah, dude.
Anybody who any of the greatest artists that have talked, been given interviews about, well, how did you come up with this major hit? You wrote it in one evening or 15 minutes on the back of a napkin, like, and it's the greatest hit of all time. Like, how did you do that? They will talk about it just essentially coming full form into their mind, and all they're doing is putting it down for everybody to
It's
experience. And so,
it's very
you know,
true.
and so again, this is where we can kind of take the paranormal and translate it through this lens here, is that though
Sure.
when artists of any kind are creating in that way, that they are channeling from the ether and then manifesting it, creating it in this lower dimensional reality.
Yeah, it's really weird because the thing that happens with words like channeling is that they get this stigma about them because there's hucksters who are in it for the wrong reasons. If you say, Bigfoot, people look at you like you're crazy, and you're like, nah, dude, this is, or for what about the uncontacted forest people? There's people who just swear by it. I speak to native people, like, yeah, I had to take I went into the woods for 6 months and I had to meet them. And there's ones who would trade with you, and there's ones who won't trade with you. And you're like, what? You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like I love this, whatever this is. The people, like, people just take it so, like, unexamined is, I think, the word, the best way. The unexamined life is a life, kind of, I don't know, just from my point of experience, or the way, it's just kind of boring. You know what I mean? It's just,
I,
for me,
was it
it's,
Socrates or Aristotle? I can't remember which one of the scientists or philosophers. I think it was Socrates who said the unexaminated
was
life
it was that
is.
Socrates? Did I
I think
just did I just quote Socrates?
I think you did just pull out a philosopher there. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
All right, yeah. So I mean, there's these words of wisdom, have been around for quite a long time, and esoteric knowledge. It's there for a reason. It's
Yeah.
ancient knowledge that I have found fascinating to dig into. Once you get beyond that day to day grind of, I just need a coffee, I just need to pay the bills, I just need, whatever, and you really start to slow down and examine things. So, um, yeah, shoot, what was I going to say? There was something about, oh, the channeling. So, a quick note about that,
Absolutely.
that I noticed you say that it has a loaded negative association
Yes.
into common language. And this is one of those things that I learned when studying with Tillie and learning non-human psychology, is that they do not have loaded language. They have a word, and that word means that word. There is no emotional association. There is no multiple duplicit interpretations depending on what culture or what day of the week, or like, it's not, none of that. It is literal language, which took me so very long to learn with Tilly, that things like, oh, I'll just be a minute. And if you're not back in 60 seconds, that's perplexing because you said a minute. 1 minute is 60 seconds. And
Oh,
so as I, yeah, or, we have these common sayings like kill two birds with one stone. When we say something like that, we mean we've accomplished something, two different, one action, two different accomplishments were made at the same time. But the vibration of that language is very violent. So we are killing something with it. But most people, when they use the phrase, I kill two birds with one stone with that, they just,
yeah.
no big deal.
I had an actual joke about that. I've done stand up comedy too for many years, and I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
killing two birds with one stone is fortuitous. Killing one bird with two stones is malicious.
Yes. Yeah, right. It is.
It's just,
It is
I love wordplay. So yeah, this is.
fantastic.
I think we have so much more to unpack. I'd
Oh,
like
for
to put
sure.
these. Yeah. Is there any possibility that maybe your wife would come on?
Yeah, I think she probably would. It'll be a little while because we're going to be attending the Full Disclosure Now conference in next month in July down here in St. Pete's Beach, Florida. So, I mean, for anybody if they're listening and they're here in the area, we're going to be distinguished guests at the
No kidding.
convention
You're
for
speaking.
that
You're
week.
going to be speaking.
Not speaking this year, but we're on the list of just honorary guests essentially that'll be out and about with the coordinator of the group or I'm sorry, the coordinator of the event. And yeah, so for anybody that wants to chat some more, if you happen to be there, cool, that's awesome. But yeah,
Wow,
it'll probably be closer to like September, October before we have dates to be able to come back on and talk a whole lot more about all
absolutely.
the things that you want. So
It's been I enjoy it. It's it kind of, I love putting pieces of the puzzle together that there's things that you're saying that I don't agree with. There's things that you're saying that I have, let's put it this way, that I haven't experienced yet. That's good enough for me. That's
yeah,
fair enough.
yeah.
I think that's kind of like an olive branch, I think you would say. And it's been a fantastic conversation. Is anything else you're promoting other than being there in St. Pete?
In St. Pete, also when I was mentioning earlier, so we have that series that I've been putting out on YouTube. It's been on pause for a little bit, but I'm going to be back to it. The channel named The Weird Walk Home, and the series that I'm working on is called The Intermediary Diaries. But also, Tillie has a Facebook that you can reach out to us. Her name at Tillie Treadwell. Send messages there, that kind of stuff. She usually does all of the social outreach and scheduling and stuff for me in that way. But
All
yeah,
right.
and I think it'd be real fun to have you let me know next time what sorts of things that the differences
Oh
that
yeah,
you
yeah,
have,
yeah.
because I love talking about the different, because of course I could benefit as well from getting those different aspects, and I think hashing those things out real time is helpful not only to us but anybody listening who might have those same things going on. So
Absolutely. How would you say, an exchange of different concepts and ideas and maybe different approaches into looking into things. I'm not going to say I'm by any means enlightened, but at least I know that. You know what I mean?
it's
At
an
least I
evolving
know.
process. It's an
Right.
evolving
And
process,
it
brother.
never ends. And it never ends. Like you're,
Exactly.
yeah. And all those links, guys, are down in the description below. Okay. Artemaeus.
You
Did I
got
get it?
it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that
Yep.
your name, or is that like your name that you picked, or did your family give that to
That's
you?
it. Yeah, that's it. Yep.
Wow. All right. Hey, your dad's awesome. That's a cool name. I don't think I've
Yes.
ever heard that one, dude.
You're a cool guy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This has been fantastic, man. I appreciate it so much, and I'm going to most definitely have you back on a live, and that way you can kind of maybe field some questions, because I think my community would love to talk to you, man.
Absolutely. Would love it.
Okay, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciated it. Or I
Thank you
appreciate
for
it. How's
having
that?
me.
Appreciated it. Why would I say the past tense?
It's
All right,
okay.
buddy. Thank
Had
you
a
so
lot
much.
to chew on in this talk, so it's all right.
Absolutely. Okay, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Remember, we are the eye. We are aware. Love you all.